The hospital room was eerily quiet, except for the soft beeping of the machines that filled the sterile air. The pale light from the overhead lamps cast long shadows on the walls, reflecting the deep sorrow that had taken over the room. A young black girl, no more than 8 years old, stood beside the bed, her small frame trembling with grief. Her big brown eyes were filled with unspeakable sadness as she stared at the tiny, still form that lay on the bed before her. Her hands shook, and the weight of the moment seemed unbearable. She had asked to hold her sister, her stillborn sister. Her parents, though devastated, knew it was something their daughter needed to do. She had never seen her sister alive, but she had felt her presence for all the months leading up to this heartbreaking day. She had dreamed of holding her sister, playing with her, and growing up together. But now, the dream was shattered. Instead of holding a lively, kicking baby, she was faced with the stillness of a child who would never take a breath. The girl slowly approached the bed, her heart heavy with a mix of love and sorrow. Her mother gently placed the lifeless body of her sister in her arms, wrapping the fragile baby in a soft white blanket. The weight was heavier than she imagined, not physically, but emotionally. As she held her sister for the first time, her chest tightened with the reality that she would never hear her cry, never see her smile, and never feel the warmth of her sister's hand in hers. Tears welled up in the young girl's eyes, but she held them back. She had to be strong. She needed to say goodbye, even though it hurt more than anything she could imagine. She whispered softly to her sister, her voice trembling with each word. "I love you so much. I wish I could have met you. I wish you were here with me, to play and laugh, and grow up together. But I will always remember you, and I'll keep you in my heart forever." The silence in the room felt suffocating. Her parents stood off to the side, giving her space, their eyes filled with tears as they watched their daughter say goodbye to a sibling she never got to meet. They knew how much she had wanted to be a big sister. They had seen her talk to the baby bump, her hands gently resting on her mother's stomach, eagerly awaiting the day her sister would arrive. Now, all of that was gone. She had been robbed of the one thing she had looked forward to the most, the chance to be a sister. The girl carefully cradled her sister in her arms, her fingers brushing against the soft skin of the baby. She could feel the coolness of her sister's tiny body, and it made her heart ache. She wanted to believe that her sister could still feel her love, that somehow, in some way, her sister could hear her words. She closed her eyes and spoke once more, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promise I'll never forget you. You'll always be my sister, even if you're not here with me." The room was filled with the weight of the loss. The young girl clung to her sister, feeling the stillness of her body in her arms. Every part of her wanted to believe that this was all just a nightmare, that she would wake up and find that her sister was alive, that the laughter and joy they had dreamed of would come true. But as the minutes ticked by, the reality settled in. Her sister would never be there to share her life. The girl held her tightly, hoping that her love would be enough to bridge the distance between life and death. Her tears finally spilled over, falling softly onto her sister's face. She kissed her forehead gently, pressing her lips to the cool skin. In that moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift off her shoulders, if only for a brief second. She knew that she had given her sister her love, her final farewell. She had said everything she needed to say, even if it wasn't enough. For a moment, the young girl sat there in the quiet room, holding her sister, feeling the bittersweet ache of the goodbye. Time seemed to stand still as she whispered, "Goodbye, my sweet sister. I will always love you." Her parents finally stepped forward, gently placing their hands on her shoulders. Her father whispered, "We will always remember her, sweetie. You gave her the love she needed." The girl nodded, wiping away her tears. Her heart was shattered, but in that moment, she knew she had done something incredibly important. She had said goodbye, not just to her sister, but to the life they would never have. The girl stood up slowly, holding her sister close, taking one last look before she placed her gently back onto the bed. As she walked away, a part of her heart remained with her sister, a piece of her soul forever tied to the little one she would never get to know. But even though the goodbye was painful, the girl would carry her sister in her heart forever, holding on to the love they shared, no matter how short the time was. And that, in its own way, would always be enough. The silence in the room felt almost unbearable. The young girl stood there, her heart heavy in her chest, as she reluctantly let go of her sister's tiny body. Her hands were trembling, not just from the physical weight, but from the emotional burden she was carrying. As she placed her sister back onto the soft, white bed, she felt a pang in her chest, a sharp, bitter reminder that she would never be able to hold her sister again. Her mind kept replaying the moment, the one fleeting moment when she had been able to say goodbye, when she had been able to hold the sister she never had the chance to know. She took a step back, her eyes still fixed on the stillborn sister. And then she turned away. Her parents, standing quietly by the side, seemed to be lost in their own thoughts, their grief palpable in the stillness. They knew that the young girl had gone through something few could even comprehend. But now, after everything, they could only offer her silent support. The room was heavy with sorrow, the kind of grief that didn't make a sound, but you could feel it all around you. The soft beep of the heart monitor, the hushed whispers of the nurses, the low murmur of parents consoling each other. Nothing could break the suffocating quiet that had descended. Yet in that moment, as the girl wiped away her last few tears and tried to gather herself, something unexpected happened. It was so faint at first that no one could be sure if it was real. It was as if the world itself had held its breath. And then, from somewhere deep within the stillness, there came a soft sound, a faint whimper. It was so soft, so fragile, it barely registered at first. But in that instant, every person in the room froze, as if time itself had stopped. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief, and she instinctively took a small step forward, her body frozen in place. She looked at her sister, who still lay motionless on the bed. The sound had come from her, hadn't it? Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath caught in her throat. Could it be? She quickly turned to look at her parents, but their faces were a mirror of her own confusion. Her mother, who had been standing by the window, slowly turned around, a confused expression slowly taking shape on her face. Her father's eyes darted around the room, trying to make sense of the sound that seemed impossible. The sound came again, this time louder, unmistakable. It was a cry, a soft, mournful sound that echoed in the otherwise silent room. But it wasn't coming from anyone in the room. It was coming from her sister. The girl's heart skipped a beat. Was she imagining this? Could it be real? She slowly moved closer to the bed, her breath shaky, her feet feeling like they were moving through water. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched her sister's tiny arm. The skin was still cool, the body still lifeless. There was no warmth, no heartbeat. Yet, somehow, there had been a cry. She stepped back, blinking in disbelief. Her mother, now standing beside her, stared down at her daughter, her hand slowly resting on her shoulder. "Did you hear that?" The girl whispered, her voice barely audible, as if she were afraid that saying it out loud would shatter the fragile reality they were in. Her mother nodded slowly, her own confusion reflected in her eyes. "I heard it too," she said softly. "But it can't be. It's not possible." The cry came again, this time followed by a soft gasp from one of the nurses. The girl's mother quickly turned to the nurse, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Is this real?" she asked, her voice quivering. The nurse, who had been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward cautiously. "I don't know, but I've never heard anything like this before," she murmured. She took a few tentative steps toward the bed, her face pale, her hand reaching out toward the stillborn baby, who had been still just moments before. "It's impossible." But the girl's heart raced. She looked down at her sister once more, trying to process what was happening. There was no explanation for it. The medical machines around the room remained silent, the monitors showing nothing abnormal. But there had been a cry, a sound that, despite all logic and reason, seemed real. She stepped closer to her sister again, her eyes locked on the tiny body. For a moment, the world seemed to disappear, the room spinning around her. And then it happened again. A cry, a full, unmistakable wail, so human and real that it sent chills down her spine. It was as if a door to another world had opened. Her sister had been gone, but now there was this inexplicable sound. This cry that was impossible and yet undeniable. Her mind raced. What was happening? Was this a miracle? Could her sister, in some way, still be here? Was it possible that she could still hear her? That her love for her sister, her farewell, had somehow made this moment happen? Her mother stepped forward, her hand hovering just above the baby's tiny body, afraid to touch it. The girl's father, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Maybe it's her spirit. Maybe it's a sign that she's not really gone. The girl, holding on to that fragile thread of hope, bent down, her face close to her sister's. She whispered softly, "Are you here? Can you hear me? Please, just let me know you're okay." And as if answering her, the cry came again, a soft but insistent sound that filled the room, leaving everyone in stunned silence. No one knew what to make of it, but one thing was clear: something miraculous was happening, something beyond understanding. The girl stood there, her heart filled with a strange mixture of wonder and sadness, as she realized that in the midst of her grief, something extraordinary was unfolding. The room had descended into an unsettling stillness once more. The sound of the soft cry that had echoed through the walls still lingered in the air, haunting every corner of the room. The girl, still standing next to her sister's bed, was torn between hope and confusion. Her heart raced, thudding painfully against her chest as she struggled to comprehend what was happening. Her sister had been stillborn. There was no doubt about that. She had held her, whispered her goodbyes, and felt the coldness of her tiny body. And yet, somehow, this cry, this miracle, seemed so real. It was impossible. It couldn't be happening. She looked around the room, her eyes searching her parents' faces for some kind of explanation, some kind of answer. But they, too, were frozen in disbelief. Her mother had tears in her eyes, but they weren't just from sorrow. They were from something deeper, something inexplicable. Her father stood beside her, his face pale, his body rigid with the weight of the moment. The nurses, who had been standing by the door, now slowly moved closer, their gazes fixed on the stillborn baby, as if expecting the impossible to happen again. The cry came again. This time, it was louder, clearer. And this time, everyone in the room felt it, not just heard it. The girl's mother stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out toward her daughter. I don't understand," she whispered. "This can't be. It doesn't make sense." Her father, ever the logical one, shook his head, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. "There must be some kind of explanation," he murmured. He turned to the nurse, his voice shaky but firm. "Could it be something we missed? Something physical that we overlooked?" The nurse, though equally perplexed, stepped forward and placed her hand gently on the stillborn baby's chest. She held her breath, hoping for some sign, some reason to explain what was happening. But the baby's body remained cold and unresponsive. There were no signs of life, no heartbeat. The medical machines around the room gave no indication of any change, and yet the sound continued, the cry echoing through the room like an unanswered question. The girl stood still, her mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. Was it a dream? Was it just her imagination, her desperate hope trying to force something out of nothing? No, she couldn't dismiss it. She had heard it, and so had everyone else. This wasn't just a sound. It was a cry that was too real, too undeniable to ignore. Her mother, struggling with the weight of what was happening, finally spoke, her voice trembling. Maybe it's her spirit. Maybe she's still here, watching over us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the kind of hope that only a mother could understand. She stepped forward and, with trembling hands, placed her palm over her daughter's cold forehead. Maybe this is her way of telling us she's not gone. Maybe she's with us in some way. The girl, her eyes wide with uncertainty, looked down at her sister once more. Her mind was spinning. Her emotions were all over the place. She had just said goodbye. She had kissed her sister's forehead and left her in the quiet, still space of the hospital room. How could this be? How could her sister be crying that she was supposed to be gone? The question hung in her mind, unanswered, as the cry continued, soft, insistent, a signal that something was happening, something beyond their understanding. The nurse, who had been standing at the edge of the room, now stepped forward again, her face a mixture of awe and caution. "I've never seen anything like this," she said quietly. "But there's no medical explanation for it. The baby's body is not showing any signs of life. Yet, the cry, it's real. I don't know how to explain it." The girl's father turned away, his hand running through his hair in frustration. "This isn't possible," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "This can't be real. There has to be an explanation." He was trying to reason with the impossible, trying to find a way to make sense of what was happening. But the truth was, there was none. Nothing made sense. The girl felt a deep ache in her chest. She had just lost her sister. She had just held her, whispered her final words. And now there was this cry. She looked at her sister again, hoping for some sign, some explanation. The baby's small face was still, peaceful, but there was something in the air, a tension, an energy, that felt different. Then, for the first time, the girl did something that felt as natural as breathing. She leaned down, her face close to her sister's, her breath shaky as she whispered, "If you're still here, if you can hear me, I just want to know you're okay. I just want to know that you're at peace." Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it carried all the love and pain she had in her heart. As she finished speaking, the cry came again, a soft, heartbreaking wail. The room seemed to hold its breath, and for the briefest of moments, everything in the room felt alive with a strange, inexplicable energy. The girl's eyes filled with tears, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it her sister? Was it really her? Was this the sign they had all been waiting for? The truth was still unclear, but in that moment, the girl knew that something profound was happening. Something beyond her understanding, beyond anyone's understanding. But whatever it was undeniable. And as the cry echoed through the room once again, she held on to the hope that her sister, in some way, was still with them. And that hope, fragile as it was, became the thread that held them all together in that moment of grief and uncertainty. The room, filled with the soft hum of machines and the low murmurs of a family still trying to make sense of the unimaginable, was heavy with tension. Every heartbeat seemed to echo louder in the silence, and every eye remained fixed on the stillborn baby in the bed. The cry, the soft, haunting cry, had come again. And this time, there was no denying it. No one knew where it was coming from, but it was real. The air in the room was thick with a strange mix of hope and fear. What was happening? Could it really be that the baby wasn't gone? Could this be a sign, a miracle even, that no one could explain? The young girl, still standing at her sister's side, looked down at the tiny body in her arms. Her hands were trembling as she tried to make sense of everything that had occurred in the past few moments. Her heart was a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, she still felt the deep ache of loss, the pain of having said goodbye to her sister before she could even know her. But on the other hand, there was the overwhelming feeling that something extraordinary had happened. The cry, the miracle, the impossibility, was a thread pulling her into something beyond her understanding. Her mother, still standing beside her, watched the girl with a mix of awe and sorrow. The confusion in her eyes was evident, but there was also a flicker of something else. Hope. She had been holding on to the belief that her daughter's spirit was somehow present in the room, and that this was a sign, a way for her to speak to them from beyond. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Could it be? Could it be that she's telling us she's not gone? That she's still with us in some way?" The father, who had been pacing back and forth, finally stopped. He turned, his face pale but resolute, and walked over to his wife and daughter. His expression was solemn, but there was a quiet strength in the way he held himself. Maybe there's no logical explanation. Maybe, just maybe, she's here in spirit, watching over us. Maybe this is how she's telling us that she's okay, that she's at peace. The room seemed to grow even quieter at his words, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The girl's eyes never left her sister. She looked down at the tiny, lifeless form in her arms, her heart aching as she tried to grasp the impossible reality. The baby's cry had been a soft, eerie sound that seemed to echo through the very fabric of the room. But there was no mistaking it. It was real. It was as though her sister, though gone from this world, was still here in some way. With a soft, steadying breath, the girl leaned down again, her face close to her sister's. She spoke quietly, her voice full of love and sadness. "If you can hear me, I just want you to know that I will always love you. I will always remember you. I'll carry you with me, in my heart, forever. You'll never be alone, and I won't ever forget you." And then, just as her words hung in the air, something extraordinary happened. The cry came again, this time soft, and almost like a sigh, as if the baby was acknowledging her sister's love, her final words. The girl's heart swelled, her chest tight with emotion. She could feel it, the presence. It wasn't something physical, not something she could touch or see, but it was there, in the room with them. A warmth, a sense of peace that filled the space, as though the baby was saying, "I hear you. I'm at peace." Her parents stood in stunned silence, their hands reaching out to comfort each other. Her mother, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "She's okay. She's at peace now. She's telling us she's okay." Her voice was soft, full of acceptance and love, and it seemed to bring an overwhelming sense of calm to the room. The girl stood there for a moment, her heart overflowing with love and grief, but now there was a sense of resolution. She didn't need to understand how or why it had happened, or why her sister's cry was still echoing through the room. What mattered was that, in this moment, she had been given something precious, a sense of closure, a sign that her sister, though gone from this world, was still with her in spirit. The family gathered around the girl, placing their hands on her shoulders, on her head, their hearts connected in this profound, shared experience. It wasn't a miracle in the way they had imagined, but it was a miracle in its own way. It was the presence of love, love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. It was a gift, a sign of hope, and a reminder that the bonds we share with our loved ones never truly end. Her father spoke softly. "It's time to let go now. She's telling us that it's okay to say goodbye. She's at peace." With those words, the family slowly began to step back, giving the girl a moment of solitude with her sister. She held her tightly one last time, her heart full of both sadness and love. She whispered her final goodbye, letting go of the weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long. She knew, deep in her heart, that this goodbye wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a new chapter in her life, where the love for her sister would live on forever, in her heart, in her memories, and in the quiet moments when she would remember the miracle of this moment. As she placed her sister back in the bed, she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt before. She knew that her sister was at rest now, and that the love they shared would always remain, no matter the distance between life and death. The family walked away from the room together, their hearts healing, their love for one another stronger than ever. In the quiet that followed, the cry faded into nothingness, but the love remained, forever.